Hello, and welcome to the first in our series of Photoshop tutorials. We'll be starting today by showing you how to create a new document in Photoshop. To get started, open your Photoshop program. From there, you can easily begin creating a new document by using the drop-down window under File. Click on File to see the drop-down window. After that, the first command you see in the drop-down window is New. Click on New to start creating a new document in Photoshop. Once the new document window opens up, specify what name you want to give the document, and change the settings as you see fit. You can change the width, height, resolution, color mode, and more. These will change the size of the document and what you'll have to work with. Once you've done that, you'll be ready to start creating your new Photoshop image. Now you can start putting to digital paper anything in your imagination. Hello, and welcome to the second in our tutorials in Photoshop. This time, we'll start by showing off some of the most common Photoshop selection tools. First, make sure you have your Photoshop open and a document ready. As you can see, we've got our document ready and can now select anything on the image. Selection tools help you pick and choose what you want out of the image you're currently editing. We'll start by using the rectangular selection tool you'll see here. By selecting the rectangular selection tool, you can click and drag a selection of any size you want on your image. This will allow you to select exactly what you want from the image, albeit in a rectangle or a square. This is the most common form of selection in an image. From there, we can switch the selection tool by going over to the rectangle selection tool, right-click on it, and see a drop-down box of other selection tools. We'll switch to the elliptical marquee tool, which allows us to select things on the image not in a rectangular pattern, but in an oval or circle pattern. Once you've selected something with these tools, you might be ready for a little more advanced selection tool, which will allow you to select things in a creative way, the lasso tool. The lasso tool is more interesting than the previous tools because it allows you to select things in a more controlled manner. Your precise movement of the mouse while holding down the left mouse button will allow you to draw out a selection of your choice. As you can see, the tool allows us to create our own selection exactly this way, but it can be very messy if you don't have practice with it. The final selection tool we'll talk about that is common in use is the magic wand. The magic wand is a tool that allows Photoshop to think about what you're trying to select and select them as you click on the parts of the image with the tool. Observe. As you can see, the magic wand has allowed us to select only part of this image, not all of it. It would take many more clicks to get this image the way we wanted, so it may be time-consuming. And that's it for the common selection tools and their uses. Welcome to the third tutorial in our Photoshop series. Before we move on to other topics, let's talk about some of the file types and modes that you will be using to save various files that Photoshop can do. Photoshop can save many different file types, and each one can have a different use in other projects. The default file type that Photoshop wants to use is a PSD file. If you see here, I have saved my previous file that I had open into a PSD file after we have selected parts of it. A Photoshop data file will allow you to have layers, which are editable and a lot easier to manage. Moving on from there, we can see that the document that I have open next is a JPEG file. What happened to the checkerboard background? That was the transparency of my previous image, which a JPEG does not support. What if we want to have an image that's not a PSD, not a JPEG, but supports transparency? The file format that can do that is called a PNG. A PNG image allows the transparent data from the PSD to be saved and used, so you can have interesting images and projects that look professional instead of blocky white backgrounds. Next, there's a file format that you might come across that Photoshop can use. It's called the PDF. A PDF, or Portable Document Format, is usually used on readers like Acrobat Reader. With Photoshop, you can open it, however. It will ask you to import the file instead of just reading it normally. The import window here is kind of similar as a new document file. Here I will change the resolution so that the image that we have will show up smaller than before, as I need to use it for other projects that require a smaller image. These are just a few of the image file formats you will use in Photoshop, and of course, you can save any of these formats into another format if you need to, which will allow you to fulfill many different needs for your future projects. Hello, and welcome to the fourth tutorial in our Photoshop series. In this tutorial, we'll talk about how to crop and resize images, as well as explain what resolution is and how you can get it to work for you. Let's get started. With a Photoshop document open, you can see that I have the image ready to be manipulated. What we'll do today is show off how to crop parts of the image if you need some bits of it for your projects. To crop, click on the crop image icon on the left here. This is actually one of two ways we can crop the image as well, and I'll show the second in a moment. After you click it, like before, drag a selection out of what you want to crop the image to. Cropping the image means you select those parts of the image and only those parts. When you're ready, right-click and select Crop. The second way we can crop the image is to go back, select an area with the Selection tool, and click Crop from the Image drop-down menu. Next, we'll go over how to resize an image. Resizing is a great way to get an image into a smaller or larger specified size for a client on a job or a project you're working on. First, have your image ready, then click the Image drop-down menu. Click Image Size. From there, you can see we have a menu similar to our initial New Document window, where you can change the size of the image. If the little link icon is there, this means that the image will keep its ratio as you change the size. Change the size to whatever you wish, and it will do it for you after you press OK. Need something at 800 width? It'll change the size of the image to fit that width and change the height accordingly. Lastly, I'll talk about resolution. As you can see here on the Image Size Properties window, you can see here that the resolution is 72 pixels per inch. That means the image itself will not be very large. If we change it to something like 300 pixels per inch, the image will be very large, and this is a good way to get your image to scale up quickly for banners, or scale it down so that you can fit it inside a smaller file size. Welcome to the fifth in our tutorial series on Photoshop. Here we'll be talking about how to work with layers on our Photoshop document. What are layers? Simply put, layers are the way how we can organize our image easily and smartly. Our Photoshop document open, we can see that we already have one layer of the document already in place. Over here on the right is our layer setup, and you can see how many layers we have. 1. The hierarchy of layers, meaning how they are stacked in a certain way, and if they're grouped, which they are not. So, to create a new layer, all you have to do is click the button at the bottom of the layer window that looks like a new page being turned, or hit Shift-Control-N at the same time. You can also click the layer drop-down in the top and select New Layer from there. I personally like the Layer button as it's easy to click and go. After this, you can see that we've added a second layer that is blank to our layer list. The new layer has now become the top layer, which is what will display over the image we have already. In this way, you can draw or stack images so you get exactly what you want out of the document. So, for example, you can see that I can drag the layers and reorder them any way I want. Top, bottom, stack them how you like to make the image you want. It's that simple. To group layers, you can click on the little folder icon down at the bottom next to the new layer icon, and it will create a folder. You can name the folder and drag any layers you want inside the folder. Doing this will allow you to do many interesting things, including apply effects to the entire group and more. And that's all you need to know about the basics of layers, a simple system to make image creation and manipulation easy. Well, hello there. It's the 6th tutorial on how to use Photoshop, and the topic this time is layer blending modes. After our last tutorial where we showed you how layers work, it's time to show you what you can do to your layers. We've already got our handy Photoshop document open, and it's easy to see the layers we've got set up from the previous tutorial. What we're going to do now is show off how you can create neat effects on the layers so you can create stunning documents. What we call effects on layers is called layer blending. Layer blending is a way we can add effects that will create a stronger image, change how the image looks, and more. Right-click a layer over here and click on Blending Options. Once you do this, you can see a wealth of options here to add effects to your layer. One option that is quite popular, especially with text, is the stroke option. The stroke option allows you to create an extra highlight of color around the object in your layer. Doing this can create a nice border effect to make objects stand out. The next option that can have a great effect on your image, and one you will get used to quickly, is drop shadow. Drop shadow makes your object look like it's floating above whatever you have it over in your layer order. You can adjust the direction of the shadow, the opacity, and much more. My last option that I'll go over is the color overlay, an option to completely black out or color out an image to create silhouettes, remove features, and more. The color overlay can allow you to create some interesting backdrops for your future images. There are more options in the layer blending menu, and I encourage you to check them out and see what works best with your images. Welcome to our 7th tutorial in Photoshop. This time we'll focus on the text tool, one of the most used and favorite tool by topographers all over the world. Start by clicking on the T icon on the left. As you can see, I pretty much can type anything I want in my text font picked from the side here. I can select bold, italics, underline, and more. Things like all caps, small caps, stuff like that. Of course, make sure your text is showing up in the correct color that you need for your image. Here, I've selected to make sure that it stands out from the image. Also, as you learned from before, text occupies its own layer, and if you need to select the text quickly, you can hold Control and click on the T icon on the layer as well to select all the text that you've written out. From there, you can change some other settings on other pages of the text panel, including paragraph settings, layout, and more. One last thing. You can click and drag a selection area of where text will go exclusively into. Text has a lot more functions that you can use with it, including vertical, if you so choose. So have fun! The 8th in our tutorial series in Photoshop, let's go over how to create a great glowing text effect and build on our previous tutorial of the text tool. Here we have our text. To create a great look for our text and have it stand out on our image, let's go into the layer blending modes. You might remember these modes from a previous tutorial. Right-click the text layer and select Blending Options. To create a great glowing effect, let's start by giving the text a great outer glow by starting with Outer Glow. Check mark this option and you can see the options window for the blending mode. Change the opacity how you like it, and you can also change the spread and the size of the glow. Do this as you see fit. Make sure your glow isn't the same as your text, otherwise it'll get lost in the text itself. From there, we'll make an inner glow now to set it apart from the outer glow. Click Inner Glow. This will set the blend mode to screen, but change it to normal so we can see the glow effect on the text. Set the color to blue, then set the size of the glow until you can see it make the text sort of cloudy. That will give us the effect we're looking for. After this, you can apply a drop shadow if you like, or use the gradient overlay to get even more finer control over the text's colors. Doing this will make your text stand out more than usual, and of course, tweak it how you like it or how any client or product needs. Have fun! Here's a more advanced tutorial in our ninth in the series on Photoshop. We'll be making a gold text effect that makes it look as if our text was dipped in gold. Start out by having text ready in your image. Here we have our text from the last tutorial with all the layer blending options removed to start fresh. To start creating this effect, let's start by opening the layer options once more. The first thing we want to do is make the text look like it's carved out. Use bevel and emboss here for that. As you can see, our text now looks like it has a curve to it or a 3D look. Let's change that look by clicking on Gloss Contours drop-down menu and click the ring contour. If you're unsure of which is which, just hover over each contour for a few seconds to get the name of the contour. After this, make sure the effect is set to chisel hard, so that way it looks like it was really made out of some sort of marble or stone. As we're going for the gold effect, we're going to add a gradient overlay to the whole image so we can get the gold coloring right. If it's not already, we'll set the gradient to the first gradient setting, foreground to background, by clicking the gradient drop-down menu. Then, click the gradient itself to open the color picking menu. We'll set the colors here by double-clicking the color spots here on the bottom of each gradient to something yellow and brown so that it looks gold. After that, you can see your text is now worth its weight in gold, if only in Photoshop. This blending technique can be used on other things as well, but text is one of the best uses for it. A quick drop shadow at the end makes it stand out even more, and that's it for this effect. Simple, yet effective. Welcome to the first in our tutorials on working with GIMP, the new image manipulation program. This program is a free program that allows you to do similar things to Photoshop, as well as other image editors. Opening the program, we can see that GIMP usually opens with a multi-window mode, the main image window, the toolbox, and the layers box. Similar to Photoshop, GIMP can also work with layers. In case you accidentally close any windows, you can click Window, Recently Closed Docs, and reopen them. If you like the single window mode, which is similar to Photoshop, click Window, then click Single Window Mode. Many of the different windows and dialog menus that you'll use will come from the Windows drop-down at the top. For example, if we need to use layers often, which will very much be the case, we go to Windows drop-down, Dockable Dialogs, and we can see the entire list of tools we can use for our setup. Making sure our layers window is open to the right, we can add many other options to our creation suite, such as histogram, gradients, colors, and more. Options like these are similar to Photoshop, so you can have a basic translation of knowledge between the programs here. Once you have your setup the way you want it, we can continue on to the next tutorial. From here, I'll be working with GIMP as a single window setup so that it makes it easier for tutorials and showing where options are in future tutorials. In our second tutorial for GIMP, we'll go over how to open images, save them into different formats, as well as exporting images depending on what you need for various projects. Similar to Photoshop, we'll show you how you can open an image in GIMP. Just click the File drop-down, click on New, and the New Image window will pop up. From here, you can set a template for your files, which might include a size a client for your job wants or your project needs, change the image size, width, and height on your own, and change if it's in portrait or landscape. Advanced options will let you do similar things to Photoshop, which is change resolution, color, and what you fill the background with before you start working. To open a file, just go to File, click Open, and search for any file you'd like to open. I'll open the file that we've been using in our Photoshop tutorials. Note that GIMP can open Photoshop files as well as PNG, JPEG, and PDF files. It's a very versatile program. You can also open a file into your current image as layers, so you can essentially import an image onto another one. Just like Photoshop, you can save the file as its own type, which is XCF, or you can export it through the File drop-down, then click Export As option. Here you can click the drop-down and save it as any myriad of options, including PNG, JPEG, and PDF. That's it for the basics of creating, saving, and exporting in GIMP. The third in our tutorial series for GIMP will introduce you to the basics of resizing images as well as cropping, rotating, and flipping images. These features are very similar to Photoshop, but how you do them in GIMP may differ. Start by having your document loaded into GIMP. You can see we have our image ready for moving it around. Once you want to resize your image, go to the Image drop-down, then to Scale Image. This is what resizing an image is called in GIMP. Once there, you can see the dialog box. The dialog box here for Scale Image lets you choose the width, height, and resolution of the image as you see fit. You can also change the quality of the image here as well. The Scale tool on the left here can also allow you to resize the image like a selection tool would in Photoshop. Just click the image and resize accordingly. Cropping an image also works similarly as you've seen it in Photoshop as well. Click on the Crop tool, the little knife icon, and you'll be allowed to make a selection over the image which will tell the tool where and what you want to crop. Click on the image again after selection to crop the image. Rotating the image, of course, works in a very simple way. The Rotate tool is next to the Crop tool, just to the right. Once you click on it, you can see the tool options below the tool, where you can do it by layer, or a selection similar to Crop, or a much more advanced way through a path. We'll just use the layer Rotate. Click on the layer you want to rotate in the image, and you can use a slider to rotate left, or right, or set the angle yourself. To flip an image, click on the tool that looks like a book opening here on the toolbar. Set the preferred way to flip the image, horizontal or vertical on the tool options, and just click on the image. Easy. With this, you can move and rotate, flip and resize the image just the way you want to. Welcome to the fourth tutorial in our series about GIMP. In this tutorial, I'll talk about how layers work in GIMP, as well as how to move layers, resize them, and merge them. As you can see, I have my image ready in GIMP, so get ready to work with the layers in it. Over to the right, you can see the layers list. The icon at the top of the box here shows layers as stacks of paper to help you visualize what you're doing. If I want to quickly move one layer on top of another, you can just drag the layers in order to reorder them. Layers, like Photoshop, are the best way to organize your data and create complex and interesting images from past parts of your project and make it visually stand out. To create a new layer, all we have to do is click on the New Page icon at the bottom of the Layers window on the right. Doing so will bring up a dialog box that will ask us what to call the layer, what size of the layer we want, which will default to the size of the image, and what to fill the layer with. To resize any layer, just right-click on the layer, then click on Scale Layer. Doing so will open another dialog box that will allow you to change the size of the layer's width and height. You can also use the Scale tool from the previous tutorial. Merging layers is also pretty easy as well. Just order the layers you want to merge, with the topmost layer being the one you want to merge with the layer below. Right-click the layer, and then click Merge Down. It will add the layer you right-clicked onto the layer beneath it, becoming one layer. After that, you should now know how to merge, move, and resize layers as you see fit. Easy. In this fifth tutorial, I'll talk about how to use the selection tools in GIMP. Selection tools are the best way to get the parts of the image you need for cropping, cutting, and more. Once again, we have our image ready in GIMP, so we can use a myriad of selection tools on it. There are at least 7 selection tools in GIMP. We'll go over each one in basic detail. Each one has tool options, the panel below the tool on the left that you can tweak the settings for. First is your usual rectangular selection. Just like our Photoshop tutorial, just click and drag what you want to select here. Similarly, the oval selection tool next to it can be used to select things in a circular or oval pattern. Next, we have the free select or lasso tool, where you can draw your own selection around an object so you can freehand trace a selection you need to. After that, we have the fuzzy select tool, which, much like the magic wand in Photoshop, will select a region based on the colors around it. This one can take longer than usual to select something. You can tweak the settings in the Tool Options box to change the threshold that the wand will select what you want from the image. Threshold means it will select more or less things based on the higher or lower the threshold. Then we have the Select by Color tool, which will select things on the image based on the color you have in the foreground color box, which is seen below the tool window. Then you have the Scissors Select tool, which will attempt to select things based on detecting edges on the image. As you start clicking around the edge of the thing that you want to select, it will guess where it thinks the edges of the image are. And you can guide the points of the selection so that the program can figure out where the edges of the thing you're selecting is. This is by far one of the most intelligent tools you can use in GIMP. Lastly, we have the Foreground Select tool, which will start with a lasso around the thing you want to select. Once you've selected part of the image, it will create a blue mask over the image. Then you'll be able to mark what you want the selection to pick up out of the image. It'll be the best tool to select things that are in the foreground as opposed to the background. It's really great for photos. That's most of the selection tools covered in GIMP. Now you can grab exactly what you need out of the images you're using. In our 6th tutorial on GIMP, let's start using the paint tools and learn the tool options the paint tools use. There's a lot to go over here, so I'll be breaking this up into 2 parts. The first of the paint tools tutorial begins here. With our image open, let's start creating something by using some paint tools. First, we'll use the paint brush. Make sure to check the tool options on all of these, as they will be very useful for doing what you need with each one. In the tool options here, you can see that there's a mode setting, opacity to your brush, what the brush looks like, how hard it is, think like an actual brush on an image, how soft or hard do you want the tip to press on the painting, the size of the brush, angle, and more. For now, we'll just leave it as is and create a quick square. Next, we'll move on to the bucket fill tool. Here we can see that in the tool options, we have the option to change the opacity, change it so that we fill up the spot with the tool with the foreground or background color, or even a pattern if we want to. The options below that allow us to either fill the whole selection as much as possible, or just similar colors if we want more reserved filling. Threshold here will determine how much the tool will try to overflow into the nearby colors beyond what you have filled in. Here we'll fill in our square with our background color. As you can see, with the similar colors option, it will fill in everything except the transparent edges around our square border, leaving a little bit unfilled. Patterns can be applied too from the bucket. So let's apply a quick pine wood pattern here to give the box a little wooden feel to it. Here you can see it will paint over our white fill with a nice wooden texture. Our box is starting to look like an actual wooden box. Next, we'll do a gradient or blend fill. So we'll apply a gradual color change from our foreground to our background color. This works very similar to bucket fill, just that you can choose the colors you want to fill in either as a foreground to background selection or to a preset selection of your choice. The shape can be changed as well to create more impressive gradients. Here I'll make a radial gradient inside our box fill. Make sure you select what you want to gradient as well, otherwise you'll add the gradient to your entire layer. Click and drag to determine what direction you want the gradient to go. The ink tool is similar to the paintbrush, but it creates an ink-like pool of color that works similar to real ink. The longer you stay on a spot, more comes out, and the strokes ebb and flow, much like real ink. Change the options as you need in the Tool Options window. We'll draw a little smiley face on our box. The airbrush tool is very similar to an actual airbrush, where a constant flow comes out that allows you to quickly touch up or brush color onto the image in a way that can be modified. As you see in the tool options, one of the important settings is rate, and the other is flow. Tweaking these will change the way the airbrush comes out. Watch as I set the flow to about 20. And see what happens. Now, 30. You can now see that the lines are much thicker than they were before. This gives you granular control over how you want your airbrush to look. Lastly, we have the pencil and eraser tools. Much like an actual pencil, you can draw a very fixed, quick line with this tool, and is the simplest tool in the bunch. I'll give our smiley face some eyebrows. From there, the eraser can pretty much remove everything from the image. So like other tools, you can change the size of the eraser, the hardness, and many other features. Be warned that the eraser removes all the data from the image, so you will have to recolor in a spot you erased or fill holes you might create yourself. Oops, I seem to have erased the eyebrows. This completes our first part in the tutorial about the paint tools in GIMP. Now you know a lot about how to paint up your own images.